The sitting is resumed.
Mr. Speaker, recommittal of government notices.
Honourable member for Christchurch West.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to give notice of the resolution to grant the sum of $16,900,000 from the Consolidated Fund and to place it at the disposal of the government to supplement the estimates 2022 to 2023, as shown in supplementary estimates number 9, 2022-2023. The sum of 216. Does that make sense? That means 16.
Recommittal of government business, sir. Order number 15, in the name of the Honourable Acting Leader of the House, to move that the House resolve itself into Standing Finance Committee to consider the grant of sums of money for the service of the servant.
Honourable member for Christchurch West.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you don't leave the chair and the House go into Standing Finance Committee.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into Standing Finance Committee. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This House is now in Standing Finance Committee.
In the name of the Honourable Minister in the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs, to move the passing of a resolution to grant the sum of $16,900,000 from the Consolidated Fund and to place it at the disposal of the government to supplement the estimates 2022 to 2023, as shown in the supplementary estimates number 9, 2022 to 2023, which form the schedule to the resolution. Head 13, Prime Minister's Office, in the amount of $1,500,000.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The sums of money under Head 15 here relate to the provision of 13, Head 13. 15, sorry. 13, sorry, my apologies, Head 13. Relate to the provision for the consulting and design works for the redevelopment of government headquarters. You would recall, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister making reference to this, of course, with the start of the geriatric hospital at Waterford and the plans therein to be able to link what we're doing in Beckles Road with the ongoing redevelopment to provide enhanced accommodation for not just our seniors, but certainly for a reimagined government headquarters at Bay Street to expand and to provide accommodation. These sums of monies are being placed with the BTII with respect to being able to do the design works in order to make sure that we can get that started. And so with those very few words, Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Head 13 stand part.
The question is that Head 13 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Think the ayes have it.
Head 35, Ministry of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs, in the amount of $1 million.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central.
Mr. Chairman, similarly, well not similarly, but these monies being placed at the disposal for the Ministry of People Empowerment, particularly the National Assistance Board, is to complete building improvements at both the Lancaster House as well as the Vauxhall senior citizens village. Again, sir, as we are seeking to improve the provision of care and facilities for the elderly, these sums are being placed at the disposal of the NAB to be able to complete those works. And so with those very few words, sir, I'd like to move to Head 35, stand part.
The question is that Head 35 stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Yeah. Head 86, Ministry of Health and Wellness, in the amount of $2,500,000.
Honorable member for Christchurch East Central.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the sums of monies being appropriated for the Barbados Living Lab is to advance sir, research, human and biological research, as the mandate of the lab is so to do. Construction certainly is slated to start in this financial year, and these monies are being placed there to be able to ensure that once the process is complete, that they have the capacity to commence the research as quickly as possible thereafter. What this will also be able to do, sir, is whilst that is happening, that the actual collaboration with the stakeholders can commence, and therefore ensure that certainly the public health perspective, as well as being able to deal with some of the long-standing issues in terms of research with respect to the mosquito population and a range of other matters, sir, that we can get those matters resolved that can eliminate, if you like, sir, the spread of dengue, chikungunya, and those other things that have afflicted the region, and certainly Barbados, for some time. And so with those very few words, I'd like to move to Head 86 stand part.
The question is that Head 86 stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Thinks the ayes have it.
Head 87, Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Training, in the amount of $11,900,000.
Honorable member for Christchurch East Central.
Thank you very much again, Chair. The sums of monies being appropriated here, sir, is to facilitate infrastructural upgrades as well as the digital infrastructure, sir, at 6 secondary schools. You will see sub-program 641, sir, the Aline School, 648, Graydon Seeley Secondary School, 649, sir, Grantley Adams Memorial School, 654, sir, Princess Margaret Secondary School, 656, sir, St. George Secondary School, and 0657, sir, Frederick Smith Secondary School. And as you would appreciate, sir, the government is well advanced with respect to being able to commence a number of reforms within the education sector. These 6 schools will receive these monies in order to ensure that we can upgrade their facilities, both physically as well as the digital infrastructure. As you are aware, sir, the government, even in the midst of the pandemic, had purchased, not just for these schools, but for the entire education system, had invested in providing tablets and laptops, certainly for every student, and therefore it is important that we continue to upgrade the facilities to ensure that every student can have access to the best possible IT infrastructure whilst at school in order to be able to conduct their studies. But equally, sir, we also invested in rolling out the robotics and coding program, sir, and therefore, as we expect over the next few years, that more and more of our young citizens will take to programming and coding and the like, sir, that again, these types of infrastructure improvements will only serve to unlock, sir, a lot of hidden talent that we now can expose, and therefore I look forward, sir, to not just these works being completed, but that the investment that the government continues to make with respect to the coding and robotics program right across the primary and secondary schools, that persons will be able to use these skills not everybody might become a software engineer, sir, or anything of that nature. But if we can produce, sir, the next Gates or the next Zuckerberg or somebody, sir, of that nature, then I know that we would have made a significant investment, not just in the plant, but certainly in the building human capital, sir, in the country. And as we embark upon a process to looking at education reform, this type of investment, sir, is critical. And I want to just to repeat, sir, the Allen School, Graydon Sealy, Grantley Adams, Princess Margaret, St. George Secondary School, and Frederick Smith Secondary School, sir. These 6 schools will receive almost $2 million each. It's $1,983,333 to be able to deal with these infrastructural improvements. And therefore, this again, sir, represents this government's commitment to being able to improve learning outcomes and certainly encourage people that whilst we are in school, the truth is, sir, that education really is a lifelong process. And therefore, if we're going to prepare our students for the 21st century, then we must equip them with everything that we can today to make sure that they're capable, sir, of mixing it with anybody, any part of the world, anytime, and therefore come to not just do credit to themselves and the communities, but really, sir, to serve Barbados as well. And so with those very few words, I'd like to move then that Head 87 stand part.
The question is that Head 87 stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
That's it.
Report.
Honorable member for Christchurch.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do now report passage of one money resolution in Standing Finance Committee.
The question is that I do know report to his honor the Speaker the passing of one money resolution in Standing Finance Committee. All honorable members in favor, say aye. All honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported the passing of one money resolution. Our member for Christchurch West.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this resolution be now read a first time.
The question is that this resolution be read a first time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this resolution be now read a second time.
The question is that the resolution be read a second time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this resolution be now agreed to.
The question is that the resolution be now agreed to. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This resolution stands passed.
Order number 9, sir. In the name of the Honourable Minister in the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs, to move the resumption of debate on the second reading of the Public Procurement Amendment Bill 2023.
Honourable for Christchurch East Central. Oh, sorry. Honourable for St. James South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I'm very, very pleased this afternoon to be able to rise and support the passing of this amendment to the procurement bill because of its tremendous strategic importance to economic growth, economic enfranchisement, and ensuring that a wider cross-section of the Barbadian society gets to participate in the economic activity of this country. There are certain reasons, sir, why we need to look at the purpose for procurement. In small developing economies like ours that have very limited capital, a limited enterprise development, it is vital that the spending of government is utilized in such a way that it is able to generate the necessary economic activity and empower your enterprises to be able to earn a living and generate the jobs which you need. It is stated that the regular purpose for procurement and good procurement practices would be: one, it helps to create a competitive and a non-discriminatory set of conditions to achieve the best value for money. What does that mean? It means that you will not have a situation where the big players can simply dominate the space and squeeze out all the small players. A good, well-managed procurement program allows for the inclusion of more people in the economic pie of the country. It also does something else. To achieve best value for money means that it provides for citizens the assurance that their funds are going to be managed in the best possible way, and that the things that they have identified that are critical and important to them will be executed so that their taxpayer dollars are going to do them the good which they expect it to do. And that's the reason for having a good and sound procurement management system. And that is why I'm very pleased this afternoon with this amendment as shared by the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central, who has outlined the changes that have come with this particular amendment and what it will do for the system in terms of improving it for access, for fairness, etc. It also, sir, strengthens your supplier base. If you want to grow your enterprises where they can look outside of your borders, outside of your shores, they need to have sufficient business in the domestic space that allows them to grow in such a way that they can take on a regional market, they can take on a global market. So this is a very important element in our growth prospects for Barbados. And it also encourages the rational use of resources. Sir, so often in many other countries, you hear of the problems related to how work is executed because of how procurement is distributed, resulting sometimes in persons who do not really have the capacity to execute, gaining contracts, and then not delivering, resulting in further cost to the taxpayer because more money has to be found to correct it, or the taxpayers have to do without the value of their effort in paying taxes and not get the service or the good which we anticipated should have been resolved. So this is important. Now, from the perspective of the business community, in the small business sector, getting access to business and contracts is always a challenge for them, and that's for a number of reasons. But any government that is going to be committed to the growth of their micro, small, and medium enterprises has to take seriously how it manages its procurement system. The first challenge that small businesses have is simply access to the information, to know that contracts exist, to know where to find the information, to know how to construct the proposal in a way that it is attractive and competitive and stands a good chance of being won. And therefore, having a portal where you can go and put all of your information in, indicate what are the areas of interest for you, and being able to participate in a program where you understand how the portal works is going to enable more MSMEs in participating in government business and being able to make money. What I particularly appreciate about what was shared this morning is not only the access to the information, but the fact that they have worked on making it user-friendly, making it simple, that in 10 minutes you can go and register yourself. Any time that there's a high level of complication in applying for something, small businesses do not have the time or the luxury to engage in complicated processes. And therefore, this innovation, this change with the bonfire is going to enable and encourage more small businesses who hitherto have avoided sometimes government business because it's too complicated, it will encourage them to participate. What I would like to ask the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central is that when they do participate, when it comes to payment, that the payments are regular and swift, because small businesses do not have the luxury of giving government credit for 90 days, 200 days, a whole year, until their particular bill is sorted out. It is very important that behind this procurement system, that there is a quick settling of those bills so that businesses can be assured that they can meet their payroll. Because this is what happens in truth, Mr. Speaker, that when you cannot get that bill that you have put, that invoice, paid and cleared, get it to the bank on time, very often some small enterprises are unable to pay their workers on the Friday or the Thursday. And that causes mayhem in your business, because those workers are not happy and they're not prepared to go home without money on a Thursday or Friday and cannot then meet the needs of their families. And this creates a lot of conflict between the workers and the employers, because the employer is not in a position to be able to settle what they need to settle with their workers on time. And the result is many small businesses have been harmed and hurt. Some have even gone out of business by trying to take up government contracts, because not having the regular cash flow to be able to keep going while government may take time to get back to them has landed many of them in problems with their suppliers, with their staff, and some of them have actually gone out of business. So I believe the two things are going to be necessary if this is going to be a successful procurement program. The access to the information, simplicity of the process, but the swift settlement of invoices is going to be critical. It also needs to be fair. And across Barbados, there is a lack of trust among small businesses that they can get a fair shake or a fair break when it comes to getting a contract. In Barbados, people feel it's the people who you know. It is about if you have money. It's about all these other things. And it has broken the trust in the small business sector as to whether or not they can get a fair break. I believe that what has been presented here this afternoon by the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central has sent the signal and given the assurance that what we have sought to set up is one that will be fair and will allow people to be able to have some confidence that their proposal will be fairly assessed and given a chance. I believe that the appeals process is also an important part, that in case the system does not work, the enterprise or the entrepreneur knows that there is another avenue where if he feels that he has been aggrieved, that he has the opportunity to seek redress by using that appeals process. So it's important that it is fair, and we must ensure that we protect the system. Sometimes, sir, when people are engaging in procurement practices, and this is not only in the public sector, this can happen in the private sector too. Sometimes where people are doing things for friends or trying to empower or enable other persons, sometimes they make sure that a particular proposal never gets to see the light of day. It's never considered. And the end result is that a person does not have the confidence that their proposal was fairly assessed up against all of the other proposals. And therefore, I believe that the appeals process that has been set here helps to act as a safeguard and gives that confidence. The other thing that I think is important here for us is the fact that there is standardization now of the requirements. I can tell you, sir, that working with small businesses, when you are trying to apply for a government contract, each entity has a slightly different way of putting their information or needing their information. And this is stressful for small businesses simply because it is usually the person who owns the business that has the task of actually putting together the proposal. and they don't always have the time, the skill, or the know-how to engage that process in a way that would allow it to be successful. And so by the removal of all of these difficulties, I can assure you that there will be a number of small businesses who will want to more engage with this procurement change because they will be able to stand a better chance of being considered. Sir, this particular procurement process has to have some very necessary supports. And I believe the Honourable Member mentioned what were some of them that have been put in position. He outlined that the various members of the various units and agencies of government have been trained on the bonfire, but he also indicated that there were enterprises, current suppliers, who were able to come in to get a training program. Having had a meeting just this week in which one of the persons from the central purchasing was able to report to us that some 20 enterprises were engaged in the training process, and we were able to engage in a discussion where we want to ensure that more businesses get to know and come in for the necessary training so that they can have the confidence to use this system to apply for government business. So training is going to be important to enable enterprises to benefit from it. But it goes further. One of the things I strongly believe is that if we are serious about procurement and the empowerment of small businesses, when it comes to government contracts, I believe, sir, that there's some contracts that can be parceled. That a contract doesn't have to be put out as a whole, but rather where it lends itself to be broken up into 3, 4, or 5 different parcels so that there are manageable amounts for small businesses to be able to engage. It will not be suitable for every project, but there are some projects where you can do that parceling, which will allow several businesses to be able to benefit from one contract. Now, why is this important? At the end of the day, a business will have workers, they will have supervisors in the field, they will have managers, they will have accountants, they will have admin staff, etc. When a contract is given to one person, it's only one set of people who get to feel the benefit of that contract. But if you parcel it, where you have 2 or 3 persons sharing in a large contract, that is 4 or 5 accountants that are being employed. Those are 4 sets of admin persons that are being employed. There are 4 sets of suppliers that will supply that particular business that are getting an opportunity. It creates a greater spread across the economy, and it stimulates greater economic growth. And this is one of the reasons why the careful management of this procurement process is going to be absolutely necessary if it is going to do the economic growth, help to stimulate it in the economy if we manage it well. One of the things I feel strongly that needs to accompany the program is the issue of project management. Sir, small businesses cannot grow into big businesses unless they're given the opportunity. When given the opportunity, I can assure you some of them will make errors and mistakes. Now, here's the difference between a small business and a big business. When a small business makes an error, it often does not have the funds to give redress. And therefore, you will end up with situations where they may run and hide and don't come to discuss. When a big business makes an error, it has the resources to make the redress. And the end result is that people then have more confidence in giving big businesses that business. But the end result is that business then tends to stay in a very narrow circle. If we're going to effectively broaden the participation, one of the things that we have to do is to look at the establishment of a project management unit where you put in place a professional who works with a group of small businesses. Take a housing contract that you may give to a co-op. You put a project manager in place who can ensure that at every step of the way, they're doing the right thing so that we don't waste the resources. But at the same time, you're giving your enterprises the opportunity to build experience, build expertise, and also build credibility within the business space. This will then lead to others feeling, well, look, you did a good job on this, let's do another. This is what we're talking about in terms of using procurement as a catalyst for growth, not only generating the business activity, but growing the capacity of your enterprises to take on more and more business. The second thing I think needs to accompany this would be the standards training, and this is one of the things that we are going to be dealing with in the Ministry of Energy and Business. The Barbados National Services Institute is going to be working on a national quality plan, because we recognize that unless we get our enterprises to work to a particular standard, you cannot build the confidence of the public, you cannot build the confidence of foreign investors, you cannot build the confidence of people that they can utilize your domestic enterprises, because you cannot guarantee those standards. And just this week, we had discussions looking at how we're going to plan this standards training, and we're hopeful that within a few months, we'll be able to present to the Cabinet and to the other entities where necessary about the plan for implementation of standards. But I believe that this should accompany the procurement program to encourage businesses who step forward and want to be suppliers to make sure that they get certified by BNSI so that they can participate. But the most important thing, sir, is the monitoring and the management of the system. Sir, having come to government in the last 5 years, I've recognized that it's easy or relatively easy to come up with a brilliant program, an innovative program. It is easy to pass it in Cabinet, bring it to Parliament and have it passed, assign the funds to execute. But sir, the challenge is in the execution. There are many times when we have found that our intent at the policy level, our intent at the instruction level, is not always carried out as intended when it hits the ground. And what this means, sir, is that it thwarts the results, the benefits that were promised to the public. And therefore, one of the things that we have to tighten as an administration is the monitoring and the management, ensuring that it's being executed in the way that it needs to be executed. What can happen sometimes is that you only know that it's not functioning the way you want it to function when the public starts to complain. But I believe that is too late. I believe one of the things that we need to do is to do assessments, have mystery shoppers, whatever it is, that when we make a change to a system, have someone go and check it, talk with some of the first persons who actually use it, see if it is working, see if it is delivering as we intended it to deliver, to ensure that it is being done. Because, sir, there are some persons who, unfortunately, some, it might be a lack of skill, some, it might be a resistance to change. We would want to hope that there aren't some who are doing it deliberately. But if we're going to ensure the delivery of what we have promised to the people, it is going to be important that there's monitoring and management of the procurement exercise to ensure it is able to deliver. That's why I was pleased to hear that even within the registration process, you have to tick and identify who you are to see, to make sure that the particular categories that we want to touch in particular are being touched, that we've put something in place in the portal to allow us to do it. Now, what is the benefit of the procurement program that the government is putting on the table? Sir, in Barbados, our procurement program is going to cost some $1.6 billion. Of this, 5% is going to be given to micro, small, and medium enterprises. This is important. This is a start. I know that the Small Business Association and the other small players wanted more, but what we need to do is to start, monitor, train, build capacity, and add more so that it is a successful engagement, both for the enterprise, for their families and their staff, for the citizens and the government. If we carefully manage that 1.6 billion that is going to be spent in the economy, it is going to result in the growth of our enterprises, which will position them to be able to export. It's going to grow our employment. This is going to generate the jobs. And by conserving the tax revenues of the people for the benefit of the people, we would have made the maximum use of our revenues. Now, the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central spoke to the regional procurement platform, and that is one of the areas that we engage in foreign affairs and foreign trade. And as the Minister responsible for foreign trade, this is the negotiations that we do at COTED in putting in place the regional procurement platform. And this was passed in April 2018. The regional pot of procurement, sir, stands at $26 billion. $26 billion, which, sir, is a tremendous amount of money. If you divide it between the 14, 15 members of CARICOM, sir, you are talking about close to $2 billion for each economy. Now, the truth is, many of the things that are needed are not things that we can produce or that we can provide. So there's only a portion of that 26 billion that really can come to regional enterprises. But I believe that if we were to use the regional procurement portal properly, that we are going to be able to conserve some of the resources of this region and use it not to empower another person's economy in the international arena, not to strengthen jobs in the developed world, not to take money and send it afar off, but to actually use part of that $26 billion to generate more business, more jobs, more growth within the region. And what will happen if that were to occur, sir? If you have greater growth all across this region, then all of the businesses and consumers will be consuming more goods and more services. That means that with a common, if we can establish our common market, we can purchase more goods from each other. In other words, we would create a cycle of growth across the region by having better use of our regional procurement platform to generate growth, which then leads to more consumption, which then leads to more growth. That is what we're talking about. That is what we need in terms of being able to tow our economies out of the doldrums where it is. So the regional platform is important. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade just completed an engagement with the private sector to discuss the use of the regional procurement platform and another platform for the promotion of our goods so that we can make better use of the consumption and demand within the region. We believe, sir, that there is maximum benefit to be derived from the proper management of both the domestic and the regional procurement portals. And sir, I want to sincerely congratulate the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central for his unstinting, consistent push to make this happen, because this has not been an easy task. It has also not been easy because I've also been behind him, constantly asking him, when are we going to get this done? And so I stand here as a very happy minister with responsibility for foreign trade and business development to see that we are taking strides to open up this economy, to to enable the growth of our micro, small, and medium enterprises, and at the same time, we'll be able to position them for regional growth as well. So, sir, I'm obliged to you for the time, and again, my heartiest congratulations to the Minister in the Ministry of Finance, the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central.
Honourable Member for St. George North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand as well to support the amendments that are tabled on this Public Procurement Act. And I also would wish to join in congratulating the presenter of the amendments for changes which, to my mind, are changes which were introduced or are introduced today to bring greater transparency and accountability to the public procurement process. Amendments which, although as the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central indicated, are not major overhauls to the Act, which was passed just under a year and a half ago, are important nonetheless in what they stand for, because, Mr. Speaker, they serve in a very real way as a constant reminder to us all of our purpose and to the general public of this government's commitment to promote through policy, through legislation, and through all the necessary frameworks that it has been working on over the past 5 years, the need for improved transparency, improved accountability, and a need for a fair and level playing field for players to operate on. I would like to think, Mr. Speaker, that it is not merely fortuitous that these amendments came shortly after a ministerial statement was laid earlier this morning by the Honourable Minister with responsibility for Labour. The Minister of Labour is to be congratulated for his presentation, and I don't speak of his attire, but his oral presentation this morning. The amendments to the Public Procurement Act, when taken with the ministerial statement.
Pay no attention to the asides, Honourable Member for St. George.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know you would understand.
I do understand.
And you would forgive. There can be no question, Mr. Speaker, of the objectives of transparency and accountability being present in both the visioning and expression of this government. The Public Procurement Act, not merely the amendments that we are considering here today, but the Public Procurement Act seeks to ensure that at all stages of the procurement process, the procurement cycle from needs assessment to the tendering process to the implementation and monitoring and so on, that transparency and accountability is reflected. And this is in terms of the framework and what the legislation actually provides for. Why do I say that? In drawing attention to a few of the areas that are covered, I hope to illustrate the point. The Act makes provision for such things as examination of tenders. I heard the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central repeating several times throughout his presentation that the Act itself and the amendments that were being introduced are intended to modernize the process of procurement. And it caused me to reflect on concerns that I have and I have had on the tenders process. As we modernize, I would like to think that beyond the system of registration and beyond the training that has been undertaken to ensure that suppliers and public officers alike who would have to facilitate these processes can implement smoothly, that there's also a mechanism for us to train and retrain and remind those individuals who have to participate in the examination of tenders, of the very important role that is theirs and the high degree of attention that should be given to such aspects as accountability, as confidentiality, not accountability too, but confidentiality. Why do I say that? Very often, or there have been too many times that I recall where there are individuals who know, for instance, that you might sit on a board. And before the board has made a determination, Mr. Speaker, on where a tender may be successful or not, there are people from the outside, or maybe people, suppliers that may be competing, that will be asking you, how comes this person get through and not me? And they can tell you what another supplier has offered in that supplier's tender. And I raise this because I started by saying that there can be no doubt that this government is seeking through legislation and through policy to establish frameworks for accountability and transparency and so on. But too often in the implementation of these policies and these pieces of legislation, we have reason to be concerned with the integrity of the process given these kinds of situations like the one I mentioned, where a person who is not in the room where a tender is being examined can give you chapter, verse, and line on what everybody in that process brought to the table. These are things, when they happen, and when others on the outside recognize that they are happening, make a system or make the work, the good work that we are doing in here in other ways seem like a mockery. So this is one of the things that I think we need to protect against, and even as we seek to modernize, Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central, in terms of the technical aspects, these are aspects that we also have to tighten up on to make sure that individuals who have responsibility for examining and granting tenders are reminded of their utmost responsibility, so that the appeals process that the previous speaker made mention of is a process that does not have to be activated on account of complaints like these. And of course, the rejection of abnormally low rates is another aspect of the public procurement process. And I link it, therefore, to all that we've heard in the ministerial statement expressing facilities, systems being put in place to ensure that underbidding and underbidding that reaches abnormal levels, that kind of process can be avoided. But Mr. Speaker, I want to pay some attention, spend some time looking at the execution of procurement contracts. For monitoring purposes under the Public Procurement Act, management of a contract is undertaken by a person who carries the title of a contract administrator. That contract administrator is engaged to ensure that, amongst other things, the supplier submits all required documentation, the procuring entity meets all of its payments and other obligations on time and in accordance with the contract, to ensure that there is adequate cost, quality, and time control, and a number of other things. But as I read that, I noticed that quite deliberately, there was no mention of monitoring to ensure that the labor component is, or the provisions are adhered to. There's no monitoring for such. And there's, why I say deliberate is because the Honourable Minister with responsibility for labor in the ministerial statement this morning spoke about amendments that would be coming to the labor clauses public contracts legislation. And that reminded us that what is related to the Public Procurement Act very directly is a component that is seen as so significant that it was carved out. It carved out its own space so that under public contracts, labor clauses get special attention. In a number of tenders processes, if they follow the way they're supposed to go, there's supposed to be labor code and labor commitments that you meet, which the labor clauses legislation working in adjunct to this public procurement legislation could be used and would be used and should be used to ensure that the labor aspects of public procurement are kept in check. So in the same way you have that contract administrator, we have the Ministry of Labor through the Labor Department that would therefore be responsible for the labor aspects of it. And where am I going with this? Because under the public contract legislation, that contract administrator is supposed to report on performance. So if the procuring entity is concerned that the contractor, the supplier, does not carry out something like the prices change somewhere along the line, the work is not done up to the standard that was agreed, and time frames come into question, reports are submitted on this basis in the same way that it would be expected that when the labor component is being monitored under the Public Contracts Labor Clauses Act, that similar reporting will be provided through the Ministry of Labor and its Labor Department. But what I found very interesting under the Public Procurement Act, Section 88, is that there is some aspect that is identified, or a number of instances where a supplier can become ineligible to continue to participate in public procurement. Specifically, a supplier is ineligible to participate in public procurement where he, or in the case of a supplier that is a body corporate, any of its directors or officers within a period of 5 years prior to his application for registration or the initiation of procurement proceedings, does a number of things, like knowingly or recklessly provides misinformation, interfered with the participation of other suppliers, engaged in misconduct of one kind or another, and so on. So what the current act is saying, if you're guilty of any or all of these things, you're automatically barred for a 5-year period from being able to tender for any contract. Beautiful. And I think the framers must be commended for it, and the intention and visioning of this government in putting in place this legislation must be carefully understood. And it is raised not only to commend, but it raises our expectation that when we go to other pieces of legislation, like the counterpart legislation for public contracts that relates to labor clauses, that where there are similar breaches. So honorary member for St. Peter, where the schedule that is mentioned in the Labor Clauses Act, where there's no adherence to it, one would expect that a similar fate would render any participant or any person or any company found in breach, render them ineligible for a comparable period of time. Now, I know that when we look at these things, there's a tendency to say, oh, well, we gotta be careful, and sometimes you gotta give people a chance because the space is so small and you can't give one set of people all the work. And we find reasons to justify why we, and I'm not speaking about this government, but I'm speaking we as a people in general, sometimes find reasons to give excuse or to make excuse for why we should not hold people accountable in the truest sense of the word. And even as our expectation was raised that the counterpart legislation, as I term it, will carry similar weight, especially in terms of its penalty and the obligations of people who are entering into contracts. We hope that the same will follow, Mr. Speaker, when we look at other areas of legislation, like the Employment Rights Act. The Employment Rights Act, where a company might find itself restructuring out a group of workers. And in a year's time, Mr. Speaker, the company start back if it is stop, or decide that it can bring back in workers doing the same thing, calling them maybe something that varies a little bit. And the Employment Rights Act only makes provision for workers who were restructured out to be brought back in within a 6-month time frame. But here we see in the Public Procurement Act, we are recognizing that there is something wrong and sinister about projecting that you can do and will do one thing and then don't do it, and we render you ineligible for a 5-year time period. And this government, as it looks to amend other pieces of legislation, and as it aims for consistency as we seek to promote transparency and accountability in pieces of legislation and policy, these are also the things that we must look at. Similarly, Mr. Speaker, and on the last occasion that I had the opportunity to speak, I mentioned, even as it relates to concessions, consistency in how we view accountability and transparency dictates that even where there are businesses or entities that benefit from concessions and there are breaches found in any other area of the legislation, whether it's labor legislation, procurement legislation, or whatever, that these must be monitored and managed seriously in order that entities and businesses and maybe even individuals who are looking to participate in any public contract with the government understands that they cannot undermine the other systems that are set in place for good governance, accountability, and transparency. So, Mr. Speaker, these were the concerns I had when I reflected not on the legislation or the amendments, but in terms of looking at things in a comprehensive manner and understanding very well where this legislation and where these amendments are intended to take us, that to remind this honorable chamber that while we continue to make some very good steps in the right direction, that we must ever be mindful, and I know that Rome wasn't built in a day, that there are so many different aspects that we must continually work on to make sure that all the pieces line up, that we have frameworks in place. But yes, beyond that, having these in place are good, but that we do the necessary monitoring of legislation, monitoring of processes to make sure that they give effect. Otherwise, when people hear us, we may find ourselves walking down the street or even coming in here proudly to debate these kinds of changes and have the average man out there saying, don't mind them saying so, but cross there, this is what happening. The other day, this is what happened, and it undermines the integrity of the process that we are seeking to shape within this honorable chamber and through the different pieces of legislation. So, Mr. Speaker, as I said before, visioning and planning, putting the policies and systems in place are good, and this government is to be commended, and I totally support all of the amendments that are brought before us, but I can only implore us and support any policy measure which will follow and be put in place to ensure that the law achieves all that it provides for. And with these words, I am obliged.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central.
Thank you so very
You
much.
notice there are people in the background all the time, all the time, all the time,
Appre-
for one day,
You
you know? One day.
totally understood, Mr. Speaker. Totally understood. Let me thank honourable members for their support and contributions in this debate, because as the honourable member for St. George North really hit the nail on the head with respect to the integration of policy. And you would know or recall, sir, that from the budget we indicated that the review of the concession process on the one hand to streamline and to improve, but to ensure that there's compliance with respect to the objectives will be undertaken. And therefore, the Customs Department on the one hand working with the BRA, NAS and others, Labor, and certainly the Labor Department as outlined here in relation to the proposed amendments to the Labor Clauses Act specifically, is intended to ensure that as one government, that certainly the left hand and the right hand and everybody, sir, is going in the same direction. And the rationale for all of this, sir, is to ensure that there is equity and fairness with respect to the way government engages. I can say to the public, as the Prime Minister articulated, the government is not here to put anybody out of business, sir. But business has to be undertaken in a manner, sir, that is really consistent with good governance. We are trying our utmost, sir, to improve all of our systems, to make it easier, to make it faster, to bring more information, and certainly, sir, improve the accountability with respect to how we expend taxpayers' monies. And therefore, we would expect that there's a similar type of process and engagement, certainly with respect to the public, to the private sector. And therefore, it is incumbent upon us to ensure that that consistency is there. What this will mean, sir, is that the collaboration amongst departments and within departments, sir, and I want to make that clear, among departments and within departments is important, and therefore recognizing that where we see a situation where there is a breach, we'll give you a specific time frame to get yourself right, sir. And if you don't get yourself right within that time frame, sir, then we start to dial back any specific benefits that you have. Because at the end of the day, if everybody don't straighten up, sir, and fly right, as my grandmother would say, sir, then we're going to end up with a situation where the taxpayers are the ones carrying the bag. And in a real sense, sir, it ends up where the losses are socialized and the profits are privatized. And we want businesses to make money, but not at the expense, sir, of the taxpayer. And therefore, modernizing procurement is one element. The monitoring from the various agencies to ensure compliance. And it is important to understand that the perspective that the government takes is that we are regulating for growth, sir. And therefore, regulating for growth must assume some measure of regularity by all players within the sector, because our focus, sir, is how do we grow the pie. And you can't be growing the pie, sir, if you got to be peeping about behind everybody, sir, to figure out if they're paying the taxes or not, sir. The reality is that if we're doing business, we're doing business. And therefore, we want to not just do business in Barbados, but bring opportunities for people in Barbados to do business outside, and as I said, sir, to grow the pie. And the extent to which the Honourable Member for St. James South raised the matter in relation to the support and project teams. the reality is that there are certain things that people just have to pay for. And how we relate to one another. Because I may very well be the best person, sir, to stuff envelopes. But if the business requires or relies on me too heavily, then I become the risk. So therefore, I must be able to let go of, sir, to ensure that others can do that. And you got to trust enough people enough to be able to do that, to reduce the risk such that you're able to not just focus on what you're good at, but you can bring in the skills that are necessary, sir, to allow for the perceived risk of the business to be mitigated and allow it to grow. And that can only be done, sir, if people are prepared to strike or to engage strategically with other business partners. It is difficult, and there's often a perception that as black people, sir, we can't trust one another. And that is unfortunate, but in this 21st century, sir, if we're able to trust the information that's being shared between us, and we get on board with all of the digital systems that we are rolling out, then that information, sir, can reduce that trust deficit. And therefore, if that trust deficit is reduced, then it means then that we can collaboratively work with one another in order to grow our respective businesses. The government will try its best to support where it can, but if it is that in the 21st century, we don't appreciate that, yes, we are all taking risks, and trust me, sir, businesses out there taking risks every day. And we laud the fact that they are taking these risks. And therefore, as government wants to accelerate its implementation across the board, then businesses too must look at how they are supplying their services, what they're doing operationally, in order to up their game with respect to being able to respond, not just to the government of Barbados, but as we bring more opportunities from outside to their attention, then you must walk, chew gum, sir, whistle, as well as everything else that are required to be done. And therefore, it means having strategic partnerships that we're able to go after, win business, and when you win the business, have the capacity to actually deliver, sir, such that you don't get a black eye with respect to what is going on. And the truth is, sir, there are many things that, as a consultant, you team up with people, sir, to be able to do what you have to do. But then there's something, sir, that is just too weighty. And you say, look, I can let that one pass for now. Because the worst thing you can do, sir, is say you could deliver something. When you know that you can't, you're relying on people to help you deliver, and you know from the outset it's going to be difficult. And whilst things may happen that you can finally get through, the reality is, sir, is that more often than not, once you take that step, then it doesn't often end well, and therefore it ends up with a whole set of mess. And as the Honourable Member said, when things go wrong, there's nobody really to back you up, and people are going to hide it. Therefore, you must be sure-footed with respect to your implementation plans in order to ensure that you go after that which you know that you can deliver. But I accept, sir, that as you move from one size contract to another, and your confidence builds, your team builds, sir, your confidence grows, and therefore that capacity to execute then is enhanced because you've been able to build a strong network of persons who understand what is required to deliver the mission. And therefore, I believe, sir, that once businesses in Barbados can collaborate, not just with others here, but outside of Barbados, that we can ensure that no opportunity, sir, no matter how large or how small, that it can pass simply because you're leveraging the strengths of each other. If you try to get the whole thing for yourself, sir, more often than not, you can get stick up. And when you get stick up, you get a bad name. And then you end up then in a situation where things get negative. But I want to give the Honourable Member for St. George North the assurance that as we embark on this specific side of the compliance and matters from the Ministry of Finance / Customs BRA perspective, working with other departments in government, like the Labour Department, the National Insurance, and all the various agencies, that we are going into this process not to out anybody, but to ensure that there's compliance in the first instance, If it leads to a situation where people are perennial offenders, well, that is entirely your decision. But as far as I'm concerned, April 1st, everybody got the opportunity to get themselves right with respect to dealing with what they have to deal with, such that by the time we get to you, you have the opportunity to show, when we do the audits, that you have the opportunity to show that you've made restitution with respect to where you've gotten. So we have a fairly advanced risk perspective in terms of who's doing what from our perspective, but in liaison obviously with other agencies, from their perspective, you'll see how that plan is to be rolled out. And therefore we will adjust according to what is identified from the stakeholders. But I say to the members of the private sector, this is not about a gotcha moment here. This is about getting it right for Barbados, because transformation means, sir, that we can't spend time trying to be running about behind people, sir. That's the truth. If we spend 80 to 90% of our time every day trying to run behind people, sir, we can't grow. And therefore, if we're going to transform this country, if we're going to grow your business, then you got to come in, open up your books, let us see what is required from a policy perspective to help you get more business, both in Barbados and outside of Barbados. And therefore, with that perspective in mind, then I am absolutely confident, sir, that the improved compliance, improved competitiveness, there are greater collaborations that could be had, because people actually are opening and becoming more confident with sharing information, and therefore it means that you can go after more business. And that is really our mission here, to be able to ensure that the economy can grow. Young people can see not just that there's traditional part of the economy, but we open up other parts of the economy for diversification in order to enhance resilience. Because as we've all seen with COVID-19, the ability to withstand quite an extraordinary shock often requires us understanding the linkages that exist between all of us. And therefore, in order to ensure that we can avoid as far as we can, it means that we must build strong enterprises who have a relatively diverse set of service offerings, so that you're not completely dependent, sir, on any single particular product offering, but you can offer a range of things collaboratively in order to make sure that your income is as secure as you could make it. And so let me thank honorable members for their contribution. But sir, this is really about making sure that we can transform the procurement, make it easier for people to do business with government, and in so doing, helping us to achieve those specific objectives that we set out from an enfranchisement perspective. Let me indicate, just remind the chamber, as I said in the beginning, at this point, I cannot tell you, sir, whether, as it relates to small business, for example, and you know that we set 5%. But right now, I can't tell you whether it's 20, it may be 20, it might be 30. I don't know, because the way the data is compiled in government is not easy to be able to do. And therefore, as people register, and we can get a sense in terms of using the data to mine exactly what is happening, then we'll be able to settle where where reality is, and therefore determine then whether the thresholds need to go up or not, and how we will get there. But we settle on those specific things, really as indicative targets, because the intention is to empower as much as we can, and by empowering those specific areas, then we know small business growth will drive the economy. And therefore, that's why the focus is specifically within that sector. And therefore, the more of that government can help facilitate, it means that the more they can go out with respect to being able to do that. So, whilst persons will be happy to hear that there's an opportunity to do more business with government, the corollary then is also true, sir. How much contracts are you winning outside of Barbados? Because it really isn't just from a tax perspective, but I want every small business in Barbados to do as much business here, abroad. And if every small business can set that as a short-term target, sir, that in the next 2-3 years that they can do as much business outside of Barbados as they're doing now, then they know, sir, that they will grow. We will get more employment in the economy, and therefore we are actively trying to bring the opportunities from outside to them in order to help build out the growth strategy, and therefore helping to build, I think, sir, a more resilient and strong Barbados. And so, sir, with those few words, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time. I'm obliged to you.
Beg the second.
The question is that the bill be read a second time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do now leave the chair and the House resolve itself in the committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself in the committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
So Honourable House is now in committee.
Clause 1.
Chair, I beg to move that clause 1 stand part.
The question is that clause 1 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Aye. Honourable members against, please say no. He thinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Chair, I beg to move that clause 2 stand part.
All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, we say no. He thinks the ayes have it.
Clause 3.
Chair, I beg to move that clause 3 stand part.
The question is that clause 3 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say no. He thinks the ayes have it.
Clause 4.
Chair, I beg to move that clause 4 stand part.
The question is that clause 4 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. We think the ayes have it.
Clause 5.
Chair, I beg to move that clause 5 stand part.
The question is that clause 5 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, please say no. He thinks the ayes have it.
Clause 6.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clause 6 stand part.
The question is that clause 6 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, we say no. He thinks the ayes have it.
Clause 7.
Chair, I beg to move that clause 7 stand part.
The question is that clause 7 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 8.
Chair, I beg to move that clause 8 stand part.
The question is that clause 8 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Report.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees is reporting the passing of one bill in committee. Honourable Member Christchurch East Central.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
The question is that the bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now passed and cited as the Public Procurement Amendment Act 2023.
The question is that this bill be passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited.
Yes. Speaker, recommittal of papers.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm commanded to lay the Judges' Remuneration and Pensions Salaries Order 2023.
Revert to government business.
Honourable Leader of Government Business. Read these out, ladies. Yeah, he did. He did. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's been such a long day, but also a long couple of weeks of us being in this chamber. I had to make sure, given that today is the 31st day of March, that we were able to get everything done, and that there was no reason for us to come back right away or in the course of next week to be able to complete the business of this House. Mr. Speaker, as I rise on the adjournment of the House, I just want to say thank you to all honourable members. I know that we will have a short break of approximately 3 weeks. I intend to adjourn the House until the 25th of March. 25th of April. I get excited. 25th of April at 10 a.m. And I know that 25th of March at 10 a.m. I would therefore beg to move the adjournment of the House until 25th of April at 10 a.m. 25th of April at 10 a.m.
The question is, Honourable Chairman, be adjourned until the 25th day of April at 10 a.m. in the phone. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honourable Chairman stands adjourned until Tuesday, the 25th day of April 2023 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.